it's become a real litmus test, this election as well, again, on Donald Trump's popularity, I think. I mean, as you say, Elon Musk has been involved to the tune of several $1 million. About $100 million has been spent on this election in total. And again, it's seen as a test of whether people in this key battleground state, this swing state, are happy with what Trump's been doing so far.
Head to the US to find out what's happening in Washington. Alistair Dawber is the Washington correspondent of The Times and The Sunday Times, and he's with me now on the eve of Liberation Day, where President Trump appears set to unveil a raft of global import tariffs. Hello, Alistair.
Good morning, Hugo. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks very much for being with us. It must be very exciting over there, waiting for Liberation Day. Can't imagine the joy you're all feeling.
Can't wait.
Ministers and officials over here are now resigned to the fact that Donald Trump isn't going to give the UK a special exemption tomorrow on tariffs, which could lead likely to lead to taxes being slapped on all British goods entering the US. It has been said a lot over here, particularly by the Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, that the UK has the best chance of any country of overturning tariffs. Is that how it feels over there as well?
Well, Jonathan Reynolds was in the US, in Washington, for a period of last week. While he might think that the UK has the best chance of overturning tariffs, I think it's fair to say that I think that the UK is going to get hit with whatever Donald Trump decides to do tomorrow. And at the moment, we don't really know. He's spoken a great deal since coming into office in January about reciprocal tariffs, the idea that if the US is charged, so they will charge their trading partner. But some of his people are sort of trying to maybe move away from that slightly. There's talk of a flat 20% tariff on all goods from all countries coming into the US. There's talk of targeting those countries that the US feels particularly aggrieved with. We will find out, as you say, tomorrow. Liberation Day is calling it, talking about the birth of new economic freedom for the United States. Britain certainly is going to get caught. I think it's going to be very expensive for the UK. And I think the UK government is going to spend the next weeks, months, trying very hard to lobby their colleagues in Washington to try and get exemptions and carve-outs.
In the short term, these tariffs are going to be paid by American consumers. They will be paying the taxes, and it'll be American businesses paying taxes on components that they use in manufacturing, which means it's almost certainly going to put up costs immediately, straight away, for American consumers. How much of a gamble is that for Donald Trump? Because you'd assume people wouldn't necessarily like that.
If you think back to last year's campaign, one of the issues that Donald Trump hit Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris with incredibly hard was inflation and prices. Pretty much any economist worth their salt at the moment is saying that this move on tariffs, however it comes out, will put upward pressure on prices, both for businesses and, as far as Donald Trump's concerned, for consumers as well, for voters. He says it's worth a little bit of short-term pain. He's refused to rule out a recession later on this year, but he says that's worth it because it will lead to a rebirth of American manufacturing. It will lead to American companies being able to source their goods in the US, and it will mean, he says, the Americans not being ripped off by trading partners in the future. He believes it's a price worth paying. Whether those people, those poorer people from rural areas who voted for him in their millions last year, will agree with that. We'll see.
Is there any particular pushback as yet, both from within Donald Trump's party and indeed outside it?
Yeah, there's lots. I mean, tonight in Florida, we have two special elections, the American equivalent of by-elections for the House. Florida has become a deep red state, very, very loyal to Donald Trump's brand of Republican politics. At least one of those seats is said to be pretty close. The Democrats feel they've got a chance, and that's because people are worried about the economy. They're worried about Elon Musk's, as he would call it, efficiency drive or cost cutting that's led to huge numbers of job losses. So there is pushback. There's pushback from Republicans on Capitol Hill who worry about what it means for them in their districts and when they have to go up for re-election perhaps next year. So there is a lot of pushback. But Donald Trump is the king of the Republican Party at the moment, and he will get whatever he wants until it goes disastrously wrong.
I mean, those two special congressional elections you were talking about, if they go badly for the Republicans, will that have an impact on Trump? Are the Republicans watching them sort of carefully as if they were a referendum, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it'll have an impact in two senses. One, it will be the voters getting their first opportunity to say we don't really like the way that the Trump administration started. But in a more practical sense, the Republican majority in the House is wafer thin, and those two seats flipping tonight. I suspect that one will stay Republican and one will be closer. But should they both flip, then that would pretty much dilute the majority the Republicans have entirely, and that will obviously make it much more difficult for Donald Trump to pass his agenda through Congress.
I mean, aside from the impact that's going to be felt by American consumers, so Janet's been in touch while we're talking, and she says, don't the US government realise that they're doing huge harm to their reputation? Is there any aspect of that floating around in American politics that's seen from Europe, seen from the UK, seen from Canada? There's been this sort of massive degradation of trust with the United States. Is that impacting internal American politics at all?
Look, there are certainly people who worry about that, and certainly people who are close to Donald Trump that worry about that. Also, are people surprised? Donald Trump campaigned last year with what he described as an America First agenda. He would put what he said were America's interests before those of any other countries. And this is his version of doing it. Yes, clearly, there's anger in European capitals. There's a great deal of anger in Canada. The Mexicans are pretty annoyed with the Americans as well. The Americans at the moment don't seem to care. The Republican Party, the MAGA Republican Party that Donald Trump now runs, sees America as being the first, second, and third most important things on their agenda. And if it means upsetting old-fashioned Europe or former close partners around the world, it's something that they're prepared to do. Now, whether that carries on in time. Every country needs allies. The world's a very small place and always getting smaller. Donald Trump's riding a high at the moment. Whether that will continue next year or the year after, who knows? And it's a case of just how bad those relationships are damaged this year, and over tariffs and over other policies too.
Indeed. Well, look, you mentioned those elections in Florida. There's also an election for a vacant position on the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, which is a key battleground state. It's become the most expensive judicial election in U.S. history because Elon Musk, of course, is a billionaire Trump ally, among other things, has been giving out $1 million check to Wisconsin voters. Listen.
Like any federal judge can stop any action by the president. This has got to stop. But let me first hand out two $1 million checks in appreciation.
So Musk pulled a similar move in the presidential election in November. Alistair, it sounds a lot like he's giving people $1 million if they vote the right way. Is that allowed?
Well, that's not how he would characterise it. This is all a draw for taking part in surveys. You take part in a survey, your name goes into a hat, and hey presto, out comes your name, and you're given $1 million check. It is allowed. The Democrats tried to challenge it in the same Wisconsin Supreme Court that the election's being held for tonight, and the judges refused to look at the case. The election's important because should the Conservative candidate win, then Trump supporters will have a majority on the bench, and similarly should the Democrat win, so there'll be a Liberal majority. There are already cases in Wisconsin about redistricting, about where effectively the districts for Congress lie. That could change the makeup of the Wisconsin congressional delegation, and again make it much more difficult for Donald Trump to pass his agenda. It's become a real litmus test, this election as well, again, on Donald Trump's popularity, I think. I mean, as you say, Elon Musk has been involved to the tune of several $1 million. About $100 million has been spent on this election in total. And again, it's seen as a test of whether people in this key battleground state, this swing state, are happy with what Trump's been doing so far.
And how do we expect it to go, that election? Or is it just...
It's very, very close. It's very, very close. It's to replace a Liberal judge, and I think the Trump supporters, the Republican Party, who are backing the Conservative, sniff an opportunity.